Hi, I'm Andrea, and I welcome you to your spiritual truth, coming from Meditation Wellness Club. I am an Infinite Way student, and my teacher is Joel S. Goldsmith. I am going to be reading from one of his books, The Contemplative Life. Chapter 1, Conscious Awareness. Many persons who are seeking for truth or striving to find a way that will lead them out of the inharmonies and discords of life gather the impression that there is some quick or short way of overcoming all their problems, that there is some kind of a message that they can read in books or hear from the lips of a teacher or lecturer or minister that will quickly take them away from the troubles of the material way of living into the harmonies of the spiritual life. This is the mistake that is made in every one of the Western countries. It is not so in the East, where the relative unimportance of time is better understood and where it is realized that an evolution of consciousness can take place only over a span of years. But in the West, where in one short life cycle we have gone from lamplight to modern electric lighting, and from the horse and buggy era to automobiles and airplanes, and from the regular television and the telephone on the wall to the cell phone and the computer in your hand. You can watch anything on it. Where there has been an increase in the speed of travel from 1,000 miles an hour to thousands of miles on an airplane, we do not seem to have sufficient time or sufficient interest to take the time for the development of spiritual consciousness. Because of this unbelievable rapid progress, materially and mechanically, which has set the tempo of our times. But when it comes to spiritual unfoldment and spiritual progress, it is quite a different story. There, an element of time enters into the situation, and it is this element of time that our Western world seems unwilling to accept, or may not be able or prepared to accept. It is often possible for those of us who come to a spiritual teaching to have our problems quickly met: physical, mental, financial, moral, even companionship. But of course, even if all our major problems were quickly met, we still would be no better off than we were, except for a little temporary relief from the world's discords. Because regardless of what freedom we attain through the help of a practitioner or teacher, we still have to evolve into our own consciousness in order to maintain and sustain that freedom. The function of the transcendental consciousness. The function of the transcendental consciousness. Although work such as that of the Infinite Way does help us, students, to overcome our present physical, mental, moral, or financial difficulties, this is not its primary function. The goal of this particular message is the spiritualization of consciousness, which in the Western world is described as the attainment of that mind that was in Christ Jesus. Christ consciousness, or the transcendental consciousness, is called the attainment of Buddhahood, or the Buddha mind, or Buddha, But all of those terms mean the same thing, because where one receives enlightenment in the east or in the west, because whether one receives enlightenment in the east or in the west, the result is precisely the same. The point that I would like you to see at this moment is that the goal of all religious work should be spiritual enlightenment. That is, the attainment of spiritual light. When this light comes, it comes as a transcendental state of consciousness. And it is the attainment of this transcendental state of consciousness that really constitutes the activity of the infinite way and is basic to its teaching. The first question that would naturally arise in any seeker's mind is, what is the transcendental state of consciousness, and what function does it perform in my experience? My answer to that is that the transcendental or spiritual consciousness is a state of consciousness which instantaneously releases an individual from all material concern. That, I believe, is its first and greatest function in our lives. It releases us from fear and doubt. It releases us from concern over what we eat, or what we shall drink, or wherewithal we shall be clothed. Most important of all, it releases us from the fear of death. Whether we have ever consciously thought about it or not, all of us on the human plane of life fear death. In fact, the one reason we fear disease is because the natural consequences of disease is death. We also fear age because age carries with it the connotation of a coming death. Death, because of its inevitability, is that which is feared, and fear of death is often the very cause of our disease or our diseases. With the first touch of spiritual light, however, all fear of death disappears, because that light reveals that there is no death, and that the experience of passing from this plane of life to what is called the next is not really a death. It is just another experience like our birth. It is a passing from one phase of life to another. In other words, life never dies. Life never had a beginning, therefore our coming into this world was but a coming forth from another phase of life. Some of those who have attained a certain degree of illumination are able to go back and to see different aspects of their life prior to their present earth experience. Although that may not always be possible, nevertheless, with the first state of spiritual light, we do realize that since there is no death, there need be no fear of it. And once that fear is eliminated, the body seems to adjust itself and health begins to manifest instead of disease and the signs of age. The transcendental consciousness brings a release from concern for persons or things. Furthermore, when spiritual light has once touched the soul or consciousness of an individual, never again can there be concern about what we call supply. What we shall eat, drink, wherewithal we shall be clothed, or how much money we shall or shall not have. The reason for this lack of concern constitutes the sum and substance of what must be our goal if we are to attain the spiritual way of life. In the ordinary human sense of life, concern is nearly always for things, persons, or conditions. If at this very moment we were to think about what it is that worries us most, we would in all probability find that our fear is undoubtedly about something in the form of an effect, a person, a condition, a thing, an amount, a body, a bit of money, or a piece of property. Always, it is about an effect. And what concerns us is always in the realm of an effect. As human beings, are we not always striving for something, some person, or some condition? It may be for a living, for fame, or for wealth. It may be for an education. It may be for health. But nearly always, our life is centered on the attainment of something or other. Most human beings fail during their lifetime to attain what they have been seeking and pass out of this life frustrated without ever having achieved their goals. Those who do reach their goals find that this achievement brings little permanent satisfaction. Some attain temporarily the perfect body, only later on to witness its disintegration. Some attain the wealth that they have sought, and then after they have it, find that when they have eaten 3 times a day, have an ample wardrobe of clothing, all the rest of their money is of so little use that their efforts to attain it seem almost foolish in retrospect. Rarely does money ever give a person the satisfaction that he thought it would when he was struggling and striving for it. And I do not have to remind you that fame gives back even less of satisfaction and is even more of an empty bauble than is wealth. This does not mean that there is anything wrong about the attainment of fame or wealth or health or a perfect body. On the contrary, all these are the added things that inevitably come when the spiritual way of life becomes our first and major concern. In the spiritual way of life, our first step is to regard temporarily our concern for things, persons, and conditions, and center our attention on attaining a conscious realization of our source. Thanks for listening to this video and watching it. And remember to subscribe and tell your friends. It's all about the Christ consciousness, the mind that was in Christ Jesus. Let that mind be in you. I give thanks to you and for my teacher, who is a follower of Jesus the Christ, and I am a follower of Jesus the Christ. I believe in his spiritual ministry. He was of a spiritual generation. Until next time, peace and love, and to God be the glory.